The day my CEO cut my budget in half, I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just smiled, because I already knew exactly how I'd cut his profits in half, too. My name's Evan Ross, Senior Operations Manager at Trellis Dynamics, a mid-sized logistics firm that prides itself on lean efficiency, which, in corporate speak, means squeezing employees until we bleed metrics. I'd been there for 6 years, building systems, training teams, and turning chaos into consistency. Then Marcus Hale, our shiny new CEO, showed up. Marcus was everything you'd expect from a LinkedIn thought leader. Polished smile, designer suit, and that fake empathy voice executives practice in front of a mirror. He called me his right-hand man in meetings, but behind closed doors, every idea I pitched became his idea a week later, with my name conveniently missing from the slides. At first, I played along. I'd seen corporate politics before. You learn when to speak up and when to let the big boss take his victory lap. But Marcus wasn't just your typical credit stealer. He was a micromanager with a messiah complex. Then came the Q2 budget meeting. I'd spent weeks preparing a proposal to expand our data integration system, something that would cut delivery errors by 20% and save us nearly $500,000 annually. Marcus nodded through my entire presentation, sipping his espresso like he was at a theater show. When I finished, he leaned back and said the words that started everything. "Evan, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but the board wants to tighten the belt. Effective immediately, your department's budget is reduced by 50%. I blinked. 50%? That's temporary, he interrupted with that smug half-grin. We'll revisit next quarter. Be creative. Be creative. That's what he said, like I was supposed to conjure operational miracles with half the resources. The room went quiet except for the hum of the projector. I could feel my team's eyes on me, waiting for me to defend us. But instead, I nodded slowly. Understood, I said. Marcus smiled like he'd just won something. Maybe he had, for the moment. Over the next few days, I watched him parade around the office, charming investors, boasting about cost optimization, while I quietly restructured my spreadsheets and email folders. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Just focused. Because when you spend 6 years building a company's backbone, you know exactly where the nerves are, and what happens when you start cutting them. Late one night, as I was finalizing the revised operations plan, I noticed something in the expense logs. Something small, but strange. A payment Marcus had authorized personally. Not to a vendor. Not to a partner. To himself. And just like that, suspicion turned into opportunity. I couldn't stop thinking about that payment. It was small, just $3,750, but it didn't belong. The memo field said consulting fee, authorized by Marcus himself, with no matching invoice or vendor code. At Trellis Dynamics, that kind of slip-up wasn't normal. Our financial system was airtight because I designed it to be airtight. Every dollar had a paper trail. Or at least it used to. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. Maybe it was a reimbursement. Maybe the board had approved something I didn't know about. Still, I bookmarked the transaction and started quietly tracing the money. Over the next week, little things began to stand out. Marcus started taking closed-door calls in his office. Long ones, during odd hours. The blinds were always drawn, and the calls always ended the same way, with him walking out smiling, jacket slung over his shoulder, humming like he'd just sealed a deal nobody else knew about. Then there was Olivia, the new strategic consultant he'd hired without going through HR. She was barely out of grad school, yet she somehow got a corner office and direct access to Marcus's calendar. I caught her one morning in the break room, typing away on her phone, whispering. "Yeah," Marcus said, "we'll move funds next Friday. He's got it covered." When she saw me, she froze. Her smile came too fast. "Oh hey, Evan. Just confirming an event budget." I nodded, pretending to buy it, but my stomach twisted. An event. There were no events on our schedule. Meanwhile, my department was drowning. With half the budget gone, I had to let 2 team leads go and push everyone else to their limits. Long nights, unpaid overtime, broken promises, all under the banner of temporary austerity. Every time I saw Marcus stroll past with his $2,000 suit and his visionary pep talks, something in me burned hotter. The worst part. He'd started rewriting the company narrative. In board updates, he painted himself as the genius who streamlined operations, while I was the practical executor of his vision. I wasn't just being undercut, I was being erased. One night, while double-checking our supplier reports, I found another anomaly. A payment labeled vendor 23B. No name, just a code. The routing number didn't match any of our registered partners. I cross-referenced it with the previous suspicious payment, and my pulse spiked. Both led to the same private account. Marcus's account. I sat there in the dim light of my office, the hum of the computers filling the silence. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but I couldn't move. Was my CEO, the man who just cut my budget, funneling money out of the company? I didn't want to believe it. But the numbers didn't lie. And for the first time, I realized I might be working for a thief. The next morning, I came in early, before anyone else. The building was quiet, the kind of stillness that makes you feel like you're trespassing in your own life. I logged into the finance terminal and dug deeper into the account trail. The more I uncovered, the colder I felt. The secret payments weren't isolated. Over 3 months, Marcus had rerouted nearly $180,000 from our efficiency savings fund, the very money he'd taken from my department, into a shell consulting firm registered under a different name, Hale Strategic Partners. His name wasn't listed as the owner, of course. But the address? His home address. My heart started pounding. It all clicked into place. The budget cuts, the fake consultant, the private calls. Marcus wasn't tightening company costs. He was bleeding us dry and disguising it as fiscal discipline. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen, my reflection ghosted across the monitor. My hands were shaking, equal parts fury and disbelief. He'd cut my budget, my team's livelihood, to line his own pockets. And the board. They had no idea. That realization hit like a gut punch. Because if I told them outright, Marcus would spin it before I finished the sentence. He was charming, connected, and slick enough to drown the truth in corporate jargon. I'd seen him do it before. Bury lies under PowerPoint slides and buzzwords. I needed proof. Ironclad proof. That night, I stayed late again. Everyone had gone home except for the cleaning crew. I copied every suspicious transaction, every invoice, every email onto an encrypted drive. Each click of the mouse felt like a heartbeat. Each file, a nail in his coffin. But anger doesn't wait for strategy. It festers. When Marcus came in the next morning, I couldn't look at him the same. He strolled through the office with his usual swagger, tossing out that fake friendly tone. "Evan, my man. How's the trimmed-down ops model treating you?" I froze. My jaw clenched. "Efficient," I said quietly. "Very efficient." He grinned, clapped me on the shoulder, and walked off. And in that moment, that arrogant touch, something in me snapped. This wasn't just corporate betrayal. It was personal. I'd spent 6 years building Trellis into something real, something that mattered. And now this overpaid fraud was dismantling it piece by piece for profit. I wanted to storm into his office and expose him right then. But I didn't. Because revenge, I realized, doesn't work when it's loud. It works when it's precise. As I stared at the glass walls of his corner office, the reflection of the city skyline gleaming behind him, a thought formed, sharp and dangerous. If he could manipulate the system for himself, maybe I could turn the system against him. For days after discovering Marcus's scheme, I felt hollow, like someone had scooped the purpose out of me and left a shell behind. I went through the motions, check reports, attend meetings, gnawed at his lies. But inside, I was splitting open. I'd given Trellis 6 years of my life, skipped holidays, missed birthdays, worked through illness, all because I believed in what we were building. And now, the man who called me his right hand had stolen not just my budget, but the very foundation of my work. Every late night I'd spent fixing systems he didn't understand was funding his fake consultancy. Every dollar I saved the company was padding his private account. The betrayal wasn't just financial. It was personal. But the breaking point didn't come in some grand confrontation. It came quietly, on a rainy Thursday, in the server room. I was helping the IT techs patch a backup issue when I overheard Marcus's voice echo through the hall. Smooth, calculated, familiar. I peeked through the glass door and saw him speaking to Olivia. "Once we shift the rest next quarter, we're in the clear," he said. "After that, Ross is obsolete. We'll restructure ops entirely." Olivia laughed softly. "Does he suspect anything?" "Please," Marcus said, smirking. "Evan's too loyal for his own good." Something inside me froze. Then it cracked. Too loyal. I stood there, soaked in the glow of the servers, my reflection caught in the metal racks. A man who'd given everything to a company that saw him as disposable. The anger wasn't hot anymore. It was steady, like coals that refused to die out. That's when the realization hit me. Marcus had taken my budget. He'd taken credit, money, control. But there was one thing he didn't understand: the system itself. I'd built the operational infrastructure of Trellis from the ground up. Every transaction, every approval path, every routing key went through code I had written. He thought cutting my budget made me powerless. But he'd forgotten who actually ran the machine. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. Not the polite kind. The dangerous kind. I went back to my desk and opened a blank document. Title: Project Equilibrium. If Marcus wanted to manipulate numbers for personal gain, I'd show him what happens when the numbers fight back. It wouldn't be illegal. It wouldn't even be traceable. But it would hurt, where it counted most. I'd make him feel the same financial suffocation he'd inflicted on my team. His empire would shrink, quarter by quarter, until the board saw the truth. Not through accusations. Through results. That night, as the office lights flickered off one by one, I stayed behind, sketching out the blueprint for his downfall. The storm outside rumbled like approval. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the reckoning. I named the plan out loud once, not because anyone could hear me, but because naming it made it real. Operation Equilibrium. Precise. Quiet. Ruthless in its economy. I copied every questionable transaction onto the encrypted drive, but that was only the start. I pulled email threads, calendar invites, and Marcus's authorization signatures. I flagged every approval path in the ERP that led to Hale's strategic partners and the private account. No edits. No dramatics. Just a clean, undeniable paper trail that showed intent, routing corporate money to a shell consulting line tied to his home address. I needed people who could corroborate what the book suggested. I tapped Mira in procurement, a quiet woman who hated waste, and Jamal in IT, who owed me a favor from a server migration I'd saved him from. I didn't tell them about Marcus. I told them about anomalies in vendor reconciliation and asked for a routine cross-check under the guise of compliance housekeeping. They found the same mismatched routing numbers I did. They agreed to keep the circle at 3. Marcus thrived on quick decisions and closed loops. So I started forcing open loops. I introduced a drill in the weekly operations review, a full vendor reconciliation exercise for Q2. It sounded boring on the invite. To the board it felt like governance. The drill would require Marcus to produce vendor contracts, scopes of work, and receipts for any consultant fees above $1,000. If he had nothing, he couldn't keep smiling. With Jamal's quiet cooperation, we added conditional alerts to the finance dashboard. Any transfer to accounts not on the approved vendor list would trigger a compliance flag and automatically email the CFO and the board's audit subcommittee. The alert was non-accusatory, just a routine exception notice, but it would force transparency the moment Marcus tried to move more money. Marcus had a pattern. He moved funds right before board meetings, then proclaimed efficiency during updates. I scheduled the vendor reconciliation for 2 days before the next board update and timed the dashboard audit to activate that morning. The goal: catch him mid-move, with nowhere to hide. Numbers matter, but so does framing. I prepared a succinct packet for the audit committee. Clear charts showing the discrepancy between promised savings and actual cash flow, redlined approvals, and a timeline that mapped each unauthorized transfer to Marcus's calendar entries and Olivia's sudden access. No accusations. Just facts laid out like surgical incisions. As I set the final pieces in motion, Marcus kept playing his role flawlessly. He gave an interview to a trade magazine about strategic austerity. He toasted investors at a rooftop event. He still walked past my desk, arms slung over Olivia's shoulder, laughing like the house always wins. I felt the tension in my chest like a second heartbeat. Every minute that passed was one more chance for him to slip away, or for our trap to snap shut exactly when it should. 2 days until the reconciliation. 2 days until the audit alerts went live. 2 days until Marcus either walked into the light or pulled the blinds tighter. And he still thought he was untouchable. The boardroom smelled like polished wood and old money. Glass walls, a long table, a dozen faces I'd known for years. Now the jury. Marcus sat at the head, smug and immovable, like a king waiting for the crown to be praised. He didn't notice the way Jamal and Mira slipped into the back row with 2 silent USB sticks between them. He didn't notice me. The reconciliation drill I'd scheduled felt ordinary when the invite went out. It wasn't. Jamal's conditional alerts were live. My packet was on the table. 2 days of quiet work condensed into a single PowerPoint. Charts, red lines, email snippets, vendor routing numbers mapped to a private account with Marcus's home address. I didn't say anything at first. I let the data breathe. At 10:03 a.m., as Marcus launched into his efficiency wins spiel, the same lines he'd used in investor calls, the finance dashboard pinged. A bright, automatic banner unfurled across the room's screen. Unauthorized transfer detected. Alert sent to audit committee. Silence hit like a dropped plate. Marcus's grin flickered. He cleared his throat, blamed a systems error. The CFO, a man who prided himself on numbers, opened the exception notice and scrolled. My packet was beside him. He read the timeline and then the emails, Olivia confirming transfer dates, the shell company registration, Marcus's calendar entries aligning with each suspicious payment. I stood up and walked to the projector like a man walking toward the gallows. I clicked the first slide. A clean table, amounts, dates, routing numbers, matching approvals. Slide 2, Olivia's text thread with Marcus scheduling the transfers. Slide 3, the shell firm's registration and the home address match. No theatrics. Just the cold geometry of a theft laid bare. Marcus bolted to his feet. "This is slander," he said, voice low and fast. "Fabricated entries. Someone's tampering with our records." His eyes found mine. "Or someone finally looked," I said. "You moved company money for personal gain. You cut my budget so you could pad yourself." The words landed like a verdict. He lunged for damage control, smooth speeches, promises to cooperate, an offer to produce supporting documentation. But Jamal had already isolated the transfers. The dashboard had a kill switch. The audit subcommittee, alerted and alarmed, voted to freeze any outgoing payments to the flagged account and to notify legal counsel and regulators. The CFO hit the freeze button. The phone in Marcus's hand buzzed. It was an investor, a voice I'd heard on the rooftop toast 2 nights before, asking for clarification about unexplained consultant fees. Within minutes, 2 more calls came through. The trade magazine pulled his quote from its website. Marcus's advisor whispered into his ear and left his face drained. Board members whispered. A motion was made. The chair called for immediate suspension pending a forensic audit. Security discreetly moved toward Marcus's office. Olivia stood, eyes wide, and stammered, the kind of admission that needed no coercion. Her event budget was a lie. The transfers had been orchestrated. Marcus's empire didn't implode with explosions or sirens. It collapsed in the small surgical actions of governance. Funds frozen, contracts suspended, investors circling back. By the time the meeting adjourned, the projected dividend he'd expected from his consulting payouts was slashed. His private profits, the thing that made him untouchable, were halved, if not more. He looked at me then, not angry so much as stripped. The king without a crown. The room that had once applauded him now hummed with the quiet mechanics of consequence. I felt vindicated, cold and precise. But as the security officers escorted Marcus past the glass, his eyes met mine one last time, and beneath the humiliation was something I hadn't planned for, a terrible, familiar emptiness. The lights flickered. The city outside kept turning. Marcus Hale disappeared from Trellis Dynamics almost overnight. No farewell email, no new opportunities announcement on LinkedIn, just a quiet memo from legal. CEO placed on indefinite leave pending investigation. Within a week, the press got hold of it. Headlines hit the business news cycle like a thunderclap. Corporate visionary accused of misappropriating funds. Internal audit underway. Marcus's carefully crafted empire, the interviews, the investor dinners, the polished quotes about efficiency, all turned to ash. The board froze his shares. His consulting firm was dissolved. And that penthouse office he lorded over? The nameplate came down before the next sunrise. When the CFO called me into his office a few days later, I expected suspicion. Maybe interrogation. Instead, he offered his hand. You saved this company, Evan. The audit confirmed everything. We were bleeding money for months, and you stopped it. I nodded, trying to play it calm. But inside, a part of me, the part Marcus had tried to break, finally exhaled. They reinstated my full budget within a week. Promoted me to director of operations the next. My team got their bonuses back. For the first time in months, laughter returned to the office. Real, unforced, human. Olivia resigned before the investigation finished. I didn't chase her down. I didn't need to. Karma has its own payroll system. But Marcus, he wasn't done yet. Word spread that he'd tried to spin the story, blaming me, claiming it was a setup. His reputation didn't survive the audit's final report. When the authorities released the findings, complete with his fake vendor trail, falsified invoices, and personal transfers, every company in the industry blacklisted him. The man who once cut my budget to pad his profits couldn't even land a consulting gig now. His name became a cautionary tale in boardrooms, the CEO who mistook theft for strategy. I saw him once more, months later, in a cafe near the financial district. He looked smaller somehow, his designer suit traded for something off the rack. He didn't notice me, but I noticed him. For a moment, I almost pitied him. Almost. Because justice, when it's quiet and earned, doesn't need applause. It just needs to balance the books. I left my coffee half finished, stepped outside into the sharp morning air, and smiled. The numbers had come full circle. Marcus cut my budget. I cut his profits, his pride, and his empire. Some debts aren't paid in dollars. They're paid in downfall. Movie camera, and that's how my CEO's greed turned into his own financial collapse. Have you ever been underestimated, betrayed, or pushed past your limit at work? Tell me your story in the comments. I read every one. If you enjoyed this tale of corporate revenge and poetic justice, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because I've got more stories that'll make you say, they messed with the wrong person. Briefcase fire.